A rancher's daughter followed his pig into the woods, but what she found there would unravel a century of lies, betrayal, and murder. It all started with a hole in the fence. 10-year-old Iris Quaid stared at the gap in the weathered planks, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm against her ribs. This was no accident. The cuts were clean, surgical. Someone had come in the dead of night, silent as a ghost, and sliced their way onto the Quaid ranch. "Buster!" she called out, her voice a thin whisper against the morning chill. But it was too late. The pig was gone. He had vanished into the one place her father had forbidden her from ever going, the woods. Her father, Nick, was a man of few rules, but this one was absolute. Never cross the tree line. He'd spin tales of phantom cats and ravenous wolves, of sinkholes that could swallow a child whole. But Buster was their prize breeding hog, the key to their survival through the harsh winter ahead. Losing him wasn't an option. Iris knelt, her small fingers tracing the fresh splinters. Wood shavings, pale and fragrant, littered the damp earth. This wasn't just a hole, it was an invitation. Someone wanted that pig in those woods. But why? A cold dread coiled in her stomach. In all her 10 years on this land, she'd never seen a single soul venture into that forest. Not her father, not their neighbors, not even the dusty travelers who sometimes passed on the main road. The woods were a place of silence, a place everyone instinctively avoided. It was as if a secret poison seeped from the soil, warning people away. And now their pig, their gentle, lazy Buster, had charged into it like he was answering a call. A call meant only for him. She glanced over her shoulder at the small ranch house. Smoke curled from the chimney, a sign her father was awake, probably sipping his bitter coffee, expecting to hear Buster's familiar snorts from the pen. He would be more than angry. He would be devastated. She had no choice. Taking a deep breath that did little to calm her racing heart, Iris squeezed through the hole. The rough wood snagged on her simple cotton dress, a final warning from the world she knew. Then she stepped into the shadows, and the familiar sounds of the ranch dissolved behind her, swallowed by an unnerving, heavy silence. The darkness inside the woods was immediate and oppressive. The sun was climbing high in the sky, but the dense canopy of ancient oaks formed a ceiling so thick, only fractured slivers of light could pierce through. It felt like walking into a cold, forgotten church. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, twisting into unsettling shapes. This was a place that didn't want visitors. Up ahead, she could hear him. Buster, his heavy, panicked grunts and the snap of dry twigs under his hooves. He was close. "Buster, you come back here," she whispered, her voice barely a sound. Shouting was out of the question. If her father heard her, if he knew she'd broken his one sacred rule, the trouble would be immense. But they needed that pig. Their future depended on it. The ground was soft with years of rotted leaves, muffling her footsteps. There was no path to follow, just a faint impression in the undergrowth, a ghost trail left by something that had passed this way long ago. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind. Wild animals, hidden dangers. But as she pushed deeper, a strange realization began to dawn on her. There were no animal sounds, no bird song, no buzz of insects or skittering of squirrels. The woods were dead silent. It was as if every living creature had made a pact to abandon this place, leaving it to its secrets and its gloom. It wasn't natural. It was a silence that felt heavy, watchful, a silence that knew she was there. Then she saw him. Through a break in the trees, Buster was standing stock still in a small clearing. He wasn't rooting in the dirt or wallowing in a patch of mud. He was frozen, his head cocked, staring intently at something hidden among a cluster of giant, gnarled oak trees. His whole body was tense, like a dog on point. Iris slowed her approach, her bare feet making no sound on the forest floor. She crept to his side, her hand reaching for the frayed rope tied loosely around his neck. When she was close enough, she followed his gaze, and her breath caught in her throat. There, almost completely consumed by time and nature, were the ruins of a small wooden cabin. The roof was long gone, caved in under the weight of countless winters. Thick, twisted vines choked the remaining walls, pulling the old timbers back into the earth. It was a sad, forgotten place, But that wasn't what sent a jolt of ice through her veins. Carved deep into the bark of the largest oak, the tree that seemed to stand guard over the ruins, were words. The letters were scarred and warped by time, but they were still, unmistakably, there. Hollister, 1847. Hollister, her father's name, her name. But that was impossible. Her father had always been crystal clear on this point. They were the first Hollisters to ever set foot in this territory. He'd bought their ranch, Landfire and Square, from a traveling merchant when he was a young man. He'd built their house with his own two hands. Their story started there. It didn't start here, in some rotting cabin in the middle of a haunted wood. She reached out a trembling hand and traced the letters. The bark was thick and calloused, like old skin, and had begun to grow over the edges of the carving, a slow attempt to heal a wound that was over 2 decades old. 1847, 23 years ago. Buster let out a low snort and trotted toward the collapsed cabin. He began nudging something with his powerful snout, something half buried in the debris of rotted wood and damp leaves. Iris followed, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. Her father wasn't just a man of few rules. He was an honest man. He wouldn't lie about something like this. Would he? She knelt beside Buster, pushing aside a tangle of weeds. And then she saw it. A metal box. Its surface was corroded and green with age, but it was solid, intact. The lock had been eaten away by rust, leaving the lid slightly ajar. A wave of trepidation washed over her. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that she shouldn't open it, that whatever was inside was a secret meant to stay buried. With hands that shook so badly she could barely control them, she pried the lid open. The hinges groaned in protest, a sound like a dying breath. Inside, wrapped in the tattered remains of oilcloth, was a stack of papers. Some were so brittle they looked like they might turn to dust at the slightest touch. The ink on them had faded to a ghostly brown, but others looked newer, the writing darker, more urgent. The first document she managed to unfold made the world tilt on its axis. It was a deed, dated 1847. It granted ownership of 300 acres, including the woods she was standing in, to one Ezekiel Hollister and his family. Ezekiel Hollister, her grandfather. The grandfather her father claimed had died of a lung sickness back east before he was even born. But this paper, this impossible piece of paper, said otherwise. It said he had been here. He had owned this land, lived on it. As she fumbled through the other documents, a small, stiff photograph fell into her lap. It showed a man with her father's eyes and her father's stubborn jaw, standing proudly in front of the very cabin she was now kneeling beside. But in the picture, the cabin was whole. A neat garden grew in front of it, and a cheerful plume of smoke rose from its stone chimney. On the back, in elegant, looping script, were the words Ezekiel and family, 1851. Her father hadn't just told a little lie. He had erased their entire history. His father hadn't died back east. He had built a life here, in these forbidden woods. Every story Nick had ever told her was a fabrication, a wall built to hide this place, to hide this truth. But why? What happened here that was so terrible he had to pretend it never existed? A sharp crack of a twig behind her sent a bolt of pure adrenaline through her system. She wasn't alone. Heavy footsteps were crunching through the leaves, coming closer. Fast. And then she heard a voice she knew better than her own, but it was laced with a sound she had never heard before. Pure, raw terror. Iris, Iris, where are you, girl? Her father. He wasn't just angry she was gone. He was terrified of where she might be. She scrambled to her feet, shoving the papers and the photograph back into the metal box. With frantic haste, she buried it again beneath the pile of rotting timber, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Another voice joined her father's, rougher, unfamiliar. She came this way, Nick. I saw her tracks by the fence hole. She shouldn't be here, her father replied, his voice strained, tight as a wire. Nobody should be here. Iris grabbed Buster's rope, trying to pull the stubborn pig away from the ruins, away from the secrets he had unearthed. But Buster wouldn't budge. He planted his feet, his massive body a solid anchor, as if he knew the reckoning was at hand, as if he wanted a front row seat. Iris! Her father burst through the trees, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a fear that went far beyond a disobedient daughter. When he saw her standing there beside the skeleton of the old cabin, he froze. His gaze flickered from her to the ruins, and a look of profound, soul-deep agony crossed his face. Behind him stood Harry Gentry, a weathered rancher from the neighboring property. Harry's eyes weren't angry. They were full of a weary pity. "Papa, I was just trying to get Buster back," Iris said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "He ran through a hole in the fence and I—" "Don't!" Nick snapped, his voice sharper than a shard of broken glass. "Don't touch anything here. Don't look at anything. We're leaving. Now." But it was too late. She had seen everything. "Papa," she said, her voice small but steady, "there's a carving on that tree. It says Hollister, 1847. You told me. You told me we were the first." "I said we're leaving." He lunged forward and grabbed her arm, his grip not rough but filled with a desperate, frantic urgency that scared her more than any anger could. "Harry, help me get this pig back to the fence. Now." Harry Gentry just stood there, his gaze shifting between the distraught father, the confused daughter, and the ghost that haunted the ruined cabin. "Nick," he said, his voice low and heavy, "maybe it's time. She's old enough. She deserves to know." "Know what?" Iris yanked her arm free from her father's grasp. She planted her feet just as Buster had done. She wasn't leaving. Not until she had an answer. "Papa, who lived here? Was it really Grandpa Ezekiel? You said he died back east." The fight seemed to drain out of Nick all at once. His shoulders slumped, and in that moment, he looked like an old, old man. He stared at the rotting timbers of the cabin, but his eyes were seeing something else entirely, a memory from long ago. "Your grandfather didn't die back east, Iris," he said, his voice hollow. "He died right here, in these woods." The words landed like stones in the dead silence of the clearing. "And so did your grandmother, and your Uncle Thomas, and your baby aunt, Sarah." A wave of nausea washed over Iris. All of them. An entire family wiped out. "How?" she whispered. "How did they die?" Harry stepped forward, his expression somber. "There was a sickness, child. A terrible fever. It tore through this valley in '52. Took near half the families that settled here. Your father, he was just a boy. Barely 16. He was the only one who made it out alive." Iris stared at her father, truly seeing him for the first time. Not as the strong, unflappable man who had raised her, but as a boy, her age, who had lost everything in this very spot. "You lived here," she breathed, "when you were a boy." He gave a slow, pained nod. "I built our ranch on the other side of the ridge to get away from this place, to get away from the memories. I thought if I never spoke of it, never came back, I thought I could protect you." He trailed off, his haunted gaze sweeping across the ruins. "Protect me from what, Papa?" she asked, her voice trembling. "From a sickness that happened 20 years ago?" But his face told her it was more than that. The sickness wasn't the real reason he was afraid of this place. It was something else. Something he still wasn't telling her. Before he could answer, a new sound cut through the trees. More voices, and the snap of branches as several people pushed their way through the undergrowth. A moment later, Serena Wade, an old woman whose property bordered theirs on the east, emerged into the clearing. She was followed by two men in city clothes, their faces grim and official. Serena's sharp eyes took in the scene. Nick's pale face, Iris standing by the ruins, the stubborn pig, and a knowing, almost cruel smile touched her lips. "Found her, did you, Nick?" she called out, her voice like grinding stones. "Should have known she'd find her way here eventually. The truth has a way of calling to the young." Nick stepped in front of Iris, shielding her as if the old woman were a wolf. "Serena, this is our business. It doesn't concern you?" "Doesn't it?" Serena cackled, a dry, rattling sound. She strode past him, her gaze fixed on the ruined cabin. "This whole mess started because you thought you could bury the past. But secrets don't stay buried in this soil, Nick Hollister. They fester." One of the city men stepped forward, holding a leather folio. "Mr. Hollister, we represent the territorial government. We've been looking into certain Irregularities with the land claims in this county. Iris felt her father stiffen beside her. What kind of irregularities? The man's eyes were cold and unsympathetic, the kind where a man lives on land that was never legally his to begin with. The second man pulled a document from the folio. Your father, Ezekiel Hollister, never properly filed his claim for this parcel. When he and his family passed, the land reverted to territorial ownership. Legally, you're a squatter, Mr. Hollister. That's a lie, Nick stammered, but there was no conviction in his voice. I have the deed. Serena let out another harsh laugh. You have a piece of paper your father wrote himself. It was never filed, never stamped, never recognized by any legal authority. This land has been public domain for the last 18 years. Harry Gentry shuffled his feet, refusing to meet Nick's desperate gaze. Nick, you knew this was coming. You can't just wish the law away. Suddenly, all the pieces clicked into place in Iris's mind. The lies, the fear, the forbidden woods. It wasn't about painful memories. It was about a crime. Papa, she whispered, looking up at his shattered face. That's why you moved, not because of the sickness. It's because you knew. You knew we didn't own this land. His silence was a confession. The first government man cleared his throat, his voice devoid of any pity. We have received several offers to purchase this property. A consortium of investors from back east is looking to expand their cattle operations. They're offering a substantial sum. Money, the second man added, that will go into the territorial coffers, as is right and proper. Serena Wade walked over to the pile of rubble where Iris had hidden the metal box. She didn't touch anything, but she stared at the spot with an unnerving intensity, as if she could see right through the rotted wood. Unless, of course, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, someone could produce proper, legally recognized documentation proving prior ownership. Iris's blood ran cold. The box, the deed from 1847. Could that be what they needed? Or would revealing it just make everything worse? She had seen her grandfather's name on it, but she hadn't understood the legal words. What if Serena was right? What if it was worthless? You have 3 days to vacate the premises, the first man announced, his tone final, both this site and your current residence. After that, we will be forced to remove you and your belongings. As the two government men turned to leave, Serena's sharp eyes met Iris's. The old woman gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Then she mouthed two words so silently that Iris felt them more than saw them. Find me. The sun had set, painting the sky in angry streaks of orange and purple. Inside the small ranch house, a suffocating silence had fallen. Her father sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, a broken man. Iris waited until his breathing deepened into the troubled sleep of the defeated, then slipped from her bed. The floorboards, usually her enemies in any late-night adventure, seemed to hold their breath for her tonight. The moon was a sharp silver crescent, casting long skeletal shadows across the yard as she crept toward the fence line. Serena Wade was waiting for her, a dark shape huddled against the gnarled trunk of a lightning-scarred pine. Took you long enough, girl, the old woman rasped, her voice a dry whisper. Come on, we can't talk here. She led Iris not to her own small cabin, but deeper along the fence, to a secluded grove of cottonwood trees that rustled and sighed in the night breeze. Serena didn't light a lantern. She seemed more comfortable in the dark. You found the box, she stated. It wasn't a question. I saw it in your eyes the moment I mentioned documentation. You went back for it, didn't you? Iris hesitated for only a second. There were no more games to be played, no more secrets to keep from this woman who seemed to know them all already. Yes, she whispered. I found a box. It had papers inside, a deed with my grandfather's name on it, and a photograph. Serena's eyes, even in the gloom, seemed to glitter with a fierce intensity. A deed from 47? Yes, and a picture from 51. And you hid it, Serena finished for her. Good girl. Your father is a sentimental fool, but you have a survivor's instinct. She leaned closer, her breath smelling of bitter herbs and old secrets. Child, that box is the only thing that stands between your family and ruin. Those government men are just puppets. The real power is a man named Marcus Blackwood. He's the head of that investor group, and he's been swallowing up land in this territory like a hungry snake. He doesn't play by the rules. What do you mean? Iris asked, a new kind of fear creeping up her spine. This was bigger than a simple land dispute. I mean, Serena hissed, that Blackwood has a reputation. Important papers have a way of getting lost. Witnesses have a way of forgetting. If he even suspects that box exists, he'll send men to get it. And they won't be polite about it. The chill in the night air had nothing to do with the weather. What should I do? Tomorrow, Serena said, her voice urgent and low. Before the sun is even a rumor in the sky, you go back to that ruin. You get that box. You don't tell your father. You don't tell Harry Gentry. You bring it straight to me. Understand? Iris nodded, her mind racing. But why are you helping us? You seemed happy that we were in trouble. A strange look crossed Serena's face, a flicker of something ancient and painful. Let's just say Marcus Blackwood owes me a debt, and I intend to collect. Helping you is just a way of sharpening the knife. She stood up, her silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. One more thing. Be careful. Blackwood's men are already in the area. They're not ranchers. They're predators. Don't let them see you. The pre-dawn air was cold and heavy with mist as Iris slipped out of the house. The world was painted in shades of gray and silver, silent and sleeping. The hole in the fence looked like a gaping mouth, waiting to swallow her again. She took a steadying breath and squeezed through, her senses on high alert. The woods were even more menacing in this half-light. Every creak of a branch, every rustle of a leaf sounded like a footstep. She moved as quietly as she could, her bare feet making soft imprints in the damp earth. When she finally reached the clearing, her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She knelt by the pile of rubble, the place where she'd hidden her family's last hope. Her fingers clawed through the damp leaves and rotted wood, searching for the solid, cold feel of metal. She found nothing. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She dug deeper, frantically tossing aside debris. It wasn't there. The box was gone. Someone had been here. Someone new. Looking for this, a voice drawled from the edge of the clearing. Iris spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Two men stood there, materializing from the morning mist like evil spirits. They were dressed in fine city clothes that were ridiculously out of place in these woods, and their faces were hard, their eyes like chips of flint. The taller one held up the familiar green-tinged metal box, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. My pig got loose again, Iris stammered, backing away. Is that so? The man said, taking a step toward her. He tossed the box from hand to hand. Funny. We found this little treasure chest buried right where you were digging. Coincidence, I suppose. That's mine, Iris said, trying to inject a strength into her voice that she did not feel. It belongs to my family. Belonged, the man corrected her, his smirk widening. He stopped tossing the box and worked the rusted lid open. This land, and everything on it, is about to become the property of Mr. Marcus Blackwood. Finders, keepers. The second man moved silently to block her only path of escape back toward the fence. He folded his thick arms and watched her, a predator enjoying the fear of its prey. My family has lived here for 23 years, she protested, her voice shaking. Without a legal claim, you're just trespassing, the tall man said conversationally. He pulled the old deed from the box, holding the fragile paper between his thumb and forefinger. I will admit, this little piece of history might have caused a few headaches if it fell into the wrong hands. Iris watched, paralyzed with horror, as he pulled a match from his pocket and struck it against the sole of his boot. The flame flared to life, a tiny malevolent star in the gray dawn. No, she breathed. Please, that's proof. Not anymore. He touched the flame to the corner of the deed. The old, dry paper caught instantly. It curled and blackened, the elegant script of her grandfather's name turning to ash before her eyes. The fire consumed their history, their legacy, their only hope. He then took out the photograph, letting the flame lick at the image of the proud man standing before his home. One by one, he burned every single paper from the box, his face impassive, as if he were merely burning trash. Within a minute, it was all gone. Everything that could have saved them was now a small pile of gray, weightless ash at his feet. "There now," the tall man said, dusting his hands off. "Much tidier." He ground the ashes into the dirt with his heel. "I suggest you run along home now, little girl, and I'd advise you to forget this little meeting ever happened. Mr. Blackwood doesn't appreciate complications." For a moment she was frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. Then the spell broke, and she turned and ran. She ran blindly, tears streaming down her face, the sound of the men's heartless laughter chasing her through the trees. The papers were gone. Serena's plan was dust. All was lost. But as she burst out of the woods and scrambled through the fence, a thought, sharp and clear, cut through her panic and grief. The men thought they had destroyed the proof. They had burned the papers, but they had made one catastrophic mistake. They hadn't burned the witness. They hadn't burned her. She didn't turn toward her own house. She veered east, running with every ounce of strength she possessed, her feet flying over the familiar ground. She ran straight for Serena Wade's cabin, a desperate, impossible plan forming in the chaos of her mind. She had to get to Serena. She had to tell her what the men looked like, what they said. It was a sliver of a chance, a tiny ember in the ashes of their hope, but it was all she had left. And she had to get there before Blackwood's men realized their error, before they realized that a 10-year-old girl with a perfect memory was now the most dangerous person in the territory. She burst through the door of Serena's cabin without knocking, gasping for air, her words a frantic torrent. "They burned it. They were waiting for me. They burned everything." Serena looked up from the cup of steaming tea she was holding. Her face was grim, her eyes hard, but there was no surprise in them. "I was afraid of that," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "Blackwood doesn't leave loose ends." "But now we have nothing," Iris cried, the tears finally overwhelming her. "It's over. Papa's going to lose the ranch, and it's all my fault." "Sit down and stop your wailing," Serena commanded, her tone sharp but not unkind. "You think your grandfather was a fool? You think he'd keep only one copy of the most important document of his life?" Iris stared at her, her sobs catching in her throat. A tiny spark of hope rekindled in her chest. "What? What do you mean?" Serena walked to a large, dust-covered wooden chest in the corner of her cabin. She lifted the heavy lid and pulled out a worn leather satchel. "Ezekiel Hollister wasn't my neighbor, child," she said, placing the satchel on the table with a soft thud. "He was my brother-in-law. My sister, Mary, was your grandmother." The revelation hit Iris with the force of a physical blow. Serena was her great-aunt. "When the fever came in '52, Serena continued, her voice softening for the first time, "Ezekiel knew he might not make it. He was a smart man. He gave me copies of everything, for safekeeping." She untied the leather straps and carefully laid the contents on the table. There, on papers yellowed with age but perfectly preserved, was a second deed, identical to the one Iris had seen in the box. But there was more, much more. "This," Serena said, her finger tapping a document with an official-looking seal, "is the receipt from the Territorial Surveyor's Office, dated 1848, proving he paid to have the land officially surveyed." She slid another paper forward. "And this is a letter from the surveyor himself, confirming the boundaries and his registration of the claim." She paused, saving the most important for last. "And this is the certificate of registration from the land office in Santa Fe, stamped and sealed. This land has been legally owned by the Hollister family for 23 years. Iris could only stare, her mind reeling. But why didn't Papa know? Why didn't you tell him?" "Your father was 16, Serena said, her voice laced with an old sorrow. "He was half mad with grief. All he wanted was to run away from this place, to forget the graves he'd had to dig. I tried to give these to him years later, but he refused. He didn't want the land. He wanted the forgetting." Just then, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed from the cabin door. Serena and Iris froze, their eyes locking in shared alarm. "Mrs. Wade?" a man's voice called out. "This is Deputy Marshal Johnson from Santa Fe. I need to speak with you regarding the Hollister land claim." Serena moved with surprising speed. "Quick," she whispered, pointing to a heavy curtain that covered a small alcove. Get behind there. Don't make a sound. Iris scrambled into the hiding place just as Serena opened the door. Standing on the porch was a tall, stern-faced man wearing the badge of a U.S. Marshal. Flanking him were the same two government officials from the day before, looking decidedly less confident now. "Marshal," Serena said, her voice a perfect picture of calm surprise. "Ma'am," the marshal said, tipping his hat, "we've received some disturbing information. An anonymous tip came by telegraph this morning, suggesting that the agents of a Mr. Marcus Blackwood have been engaging in criminal intimidation and the willful destruction of legal documents pertaining to this very property." "Is that so?" Serena replied, her face a neutral mask. "Yes, ma'am. We're here to conduct a full and proper investigation into the Hollister claim. If you happen to possess any information, any documentation whatsoever that might shed light on the truth of the matter, now would be the time to present it." From behind the curtain, Iris held her breath. This was it, the moment of truth. Serena Wade stood in the doorway, a frail-looking old woman against the might of the law and the greed of powerful men. She glanced for a fraction of a second toward the curtain where Iris was hiding. Then she turned back to the marshal, and a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "As a matter of fact, Deputy," she said, her voice ringing with triumph, "I have quite a bit of information that might interest you." 2 hours later, Iris sat on Serena's porch, her father beside her. Nick looked like a man who had been struck by lightning and somehow survived. He had stared in stunned silence as Serena, his long-estranged aunt, laid out the truth, document by irrefutable document. Deputy Marshal Johnson placed the final paper on the small wooden table between them. "Well, Mr. Hollister," the marshal announced, his voice leaving no room for doubt, "these documents are all in order. They are legitimate, legally filed, and irrefutable. The Hollister family has held clear and legal title to these 300 acres since 1848. One of the government men cleared his throat nervously. "But, sir, our records in the local office showed no such claim." The marshal fixed him with an icy stare. "Then your local records were either incomplete or they were tampered with. We placed Mr. Marcus Blackwood and two of his associates under arrest this morning on the road back to Santa Fe. Under questioning, they confessed to a long-standing scheme of bribery and document theft across the territory. It seems your local clerk had been on their payroll for years." He gestured back toward the woods. "They also confessed to burning a set of papers this morning, believing them to be the only copies." Nick finally found his voice, a choked whisper. "So, we can stay?" "You can stay, Mr. Hollister," the marshal confirmed. "In fact, according to this survey, you're the rightful owner of a prime stretch of timberland bordering the river, land that Mr. Blackwood was particularly keen to acquire." He carefully gathered the precious documents. "The territorial court will also be levying significant fines against Blackwood's company. You and the other families he cheated will be receiving substantial compensation for your troubles." As the officials made their departure, the marshal paused and turned to Iris. He looked down at her, a genuine smile softening his stern features. "Young lady," he said, "your great-aunt told me the whole story. If you hadn't had the courage to follow that pig into those woods, none of this would have come to light. You didn't just save your family's home. You helped us unravel a criminal conspiracy that has been plaguing this territory for years. You should be very proud." After they had gone, a profound silence settled over the porch. Nick and Iris sat side by side, watching the afternoon sun filter through the trees. Finally, her father turned to her, his eyes filled with a deep and painful regret. "I'm sorry, Iris," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "I was so lost in my own pain, my own fear. I thought I was protecting you by bearing the past, but all I did was lie. I lied about your grandparents. I lied about our home. I almost cost us everything." "It's okay, Papa," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I understand why you wanted to forget." He put a strong arm around her, pulling her close. "No," he said softly, "it's not okay, but we're going to make it right." He looked toward the dark line of the woods. "Your grandfather, Ezekiel, he would be so proud of you. You have his grit, his courage." He took a deep breath. Maybe it's time we stopped running from that place. Maybe it's time we went back there, together, and I told you the real stories, the good ones. A genuine smile, the first she had seen in days, spread across Iris's face. "I'd like that, Papa," she said. "And maybe we could even fix up that old cabin. Make it a place for new memories." Her father looked at her, his eyes shining with love and renewed hope. "I think," he said, "that's the best idea I've ever heard." The sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over their land. Their land, legal and rightful. Forever. And for the first time, the woods didn't seem dark or menacing. They seemed like a part of home. If you enjoyed this story of hidden history and frontier justice, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we have countless more tales of secrets unearthed and wrongs made right. And if you have a story about a family secret that changed everything, share it in the comments below. We read every single one. Don't forget to click the video on your screen now for another unforgettable story where courage is the only key that can unlock the past. Your support helps us keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching.